Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by BetRivers. If you're not using the BetRivers app yet, then what are you doing? We've got you covered. You could bet on pretty much any sport on the face of the earth. If it's out there, we've got it covered. You got a lot of international soccer going on. We're big with tennis. Obviously, baseball. My parlay didn't hit. I've been on a cold streak. I apologize for that. But we'll get it going. Football, of course, around the corner. All of it. Right there for you with the BetRivers app. So start using it if you haven't. Keep using it if you have. A lot to get to today. The great play-by-play man, Kenny Albert. He's done every sport, I think. Speaking of, we talked about the BetRivers app having every sport. Kenny Albert has done play-by-play, I think, for every sport. And he's going to join me in a few minutes. Talk a little Browns and a little Cavaliers with him. But before we do that, I wanted to get into the Guardians. And that's coming up next, right here in the Bullpen with Adam the Bull. Brought to you by BetRivers.
You're watching Adam the Bull on the BetRivers Network.
All right, let's jump into it. Nobody can stop the Guardians right now. They are absolutely killing it. They win low-scoring games. They win high-scoring games. Last night, they win their 7th straight, beating the Orioles 10-8. And those 7 straight wins have come against a good Seattle team, a decent Blue Jay team, and a good Baltimore team. They're playing great baseball. They had their first little tough stretch there where they lost 3 of 4 for Cincinnati and Toronto, and they have followed that up with 7 straight wins. They are a season-high 25 games over 500 at 51-26, and the Guardians now have the best winning percentage in all of baseball at .662, ahead of the Phillies at .658, the Yankees at .642, the Orioles at .620. I don't want to hear any nonsense about them for some of these idiot people in New York. And I'm a New Yorker. I was born and raised. I'm now a mutt, half New Yorker, half Clevelander. But I tell you, as the days pass, I'm not even saying I'm a mutt. I'm like 90% Clevelander now. This is enough. I'm sick of I didn't realize. I don't know. I could go into a whole diatribe, but then I'm going to start a war with 3/4 of the sports talk show hosts in New York, and I don't have the bandwidth for that. So I'll just say this. Let them believe whatever they want, and you got to prove it when it matters in the playoffs. I get it. But this Guardians team right now is as good as any. Yeah, on paper, they're not the best roster in Major League Baseball. But you don't play games on paper. You play games on the field. And on the field, the Guardians are the best team in baseball right now. That doesn't mean they're going to necessarily be at the end of the year, but right now they are. They have a plus 107 run differential. The only team with the Phillies are plus 118, the Dodgers plus 116, the Orioles plus 108, and then the Guardians and Yankees plus 107. The Guardians have played great against the American League East, much better than the Yankees have. Yankees have dominated the bottom of the barrel teams. The Guardians have mostly beaten good teams. In fact, they've oddly struggled against some bottom of the barrel teams here and there, especially lately when they have struggled. The rare times they've struggled in the last 6 weeks, it's been more against bad teams than good for whatever odd reason. But right now they're playing great. They're 17 over at home. They're 8 games over 500 on the road. They've scored 392 runs on the season. Who saw that coming? Only the Yankees, the Orioles, the Phillies, and the Dodgers have scored more runs, and the Guardians have played less games than some of those teams. And the most runs scored in the league right now is Baltimore at 413. So the Guardians have only scored 21 less runs than the Orioles, and the Orioles have played 79 games. The Guardians have played 77. So they're right there with any team. They're 10th in home runs. But again, only 5 home runs back of the Phillies, who are 4th in the league. Now, they're significantly behind the Yankees, the Orioles, and I want to say the Dodgers, I think, are the other team that they're back in home runs. Only 3 teams. But this is a totally different team and a totally different offense. They are really good right now. Yes, there are things that they need to improve in. The starting pitching has to get better. Some of that has to come externally. There's no doubt about it. They could use one more bat in the lineup, no doubt. But the bullpen's lights out. The defense is great. The base running is fantastic. The hitting has been excellent. And you got your ace and Tanner Bybee pitching like an absolute stud right now. So go get us another starting pitcher. Let's get Gavin Williams in the mix. Let's pick up one more hitter and let's go. I mean, this team can win the World Series this year. I 100% believe that. I think they got a chance to win 100 games this year, which I never would have thought before the season. They're definitely going to win in the mid-90s, I'll tell you that. But I think they got a realistic shot to win 100. You're 25 games over 500. You got a realistic shot. So I don't care about power rankings. I don't care what Harold Reynolds has to say. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm not going to get offended by what everybody says here. It doesn't matter. Most people nationally are not watching the Guardians. Well, they should be, because the Guardians right now may be the most, not only the best team, but they may be the most fun team to watch because they do a lot of things well. And they run the and there's something to be said for running the bases, and they're not this slap-hitting team that blew the 2-1 lead to the Yankees 2 years ago. Yes, they don't have quite the power the Yankees do, but they're a power-hitting team right now. Josh Naylor, Jose Ramirez, these guys are on pace for 40 homers. You got two guys. All right, Stephen Kwan's on pace for close to 20. Same thing with Tyler Freeman. Same thing with David Fry. They can hit some home runs. And hopefully you add one more bat, one more slugger to that lineup, and now you're cooking. And if you add, but most importantly, they got to add a pitcher. It will hopefully happen. I expect it to happen. This is the year to go all in. There are no excuses. I don't want to hear about payroll. Let's get it done. Let's get it done. The Guardians now have a 9-game lead heading into today's action over the Twins, a 10-game lead over Kansas City. I mean, it was just a couple of weeks ago. Kansas City was like 2 games out. But the Royals have fallen on hard times. They've lost 7 of 10. Twins are playing okay, but still, the Guardians are winning every day right now. They're 10 games up in the loss column in the standings in the division. 10. That's the biggest. They got the biggest lead in all of baseball. They deserve all the kudos they're not getting, but they are getting from me. Because right here on this podcast, right here on the Ultimate Guardian Show, right here on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, we're pretty much the only ones talking about this team in this town. The town is lame when it comes to baseball, and the national media is lame when it comes to the Guardians. So we got you covered, and I got you covered. I couldn't be more excited about this team right now. All right, we'll take a break. And I actually went a whole Guardian segment without mentioning Stephen Kwan, my favorite Guardian. I mean, the guy's unbelievable. So now I just mentioned him. More on the Guardians tomorrow. More on the Guardians on UCSS. But I got a special guest. A special guest, Kenny Albert, the man who was called more sports than there are. He's done it all. He's talked about it all. And he's written a book now that just came out last year. We're going to talk with the great Kenny Albert, the great play-by-play man. That's coming up next right here in the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by BetRivers. All right, welcome back. It's the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, and I love the name of his book, A Mic for All Seasons. It couldn't be more appropriate for our next guest, Kenny Albert, because I was saying before, Kenny, that, you know, here at BetRivers, you can bet on every sport, maybe even sports that I don't know exist, but you're the perfect guy for that, because it feels like you've called every sport on the face of the earth. If you told me you called anything, you could make up a sport, and I'd say, yeah, I believe that Kenny Albert called it, because you're great at all sports, and so people want you to do every different sport. Do you know how many sports total in your entire career, off the top of your head, that you have done play-by-play for?
Well, Adam, first of all, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you mentioning the book, which you might see here right behind me.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I would have to tally it up. Aside from the big four, hockey, basketball, football, baseball, I've done some boxing. I've done Olympic track and field and volleyball.
Yeah.
Actually getting ready to do water polo at the Olympics for NBC this summer. In the past, I've done some lacrosse, some soccer.
Yeah.
The one sport that I did only once where I really felt like I had no clue, despite all the studying and talking to people for a couple of weeks and watching prior matches. I was once assigned to college wrestling back in the mid-'90s when I worked down in DC. Fortunately, I had a great analyst with me who carried the show.
That's funny, you know, and folks who have never done play-by-play don't realize how hard it is. And if you don't know the sport well, you could come off like a fraud if you're not prepared. And I don't have anywhere near the career that you did. When I was younger in my career, I did some minor league baseball and some Division III college sports, and I don't really know hockey. And they asked me I got hired to do UHL hockey one season for the Mohawk Valley Prowlers in Utica at the time. The team actually folded in the middle of the season because the owner was bankrupt. And I felt like a complete fraud doing those games. I tried my best. I prepared, but I didn't know hockey as well as I know baseball, football, basketball, which is not uncommon. So for you to be so good at all these sports is beyond impressive because there are really very few people that can do that, Kenny. So kudos to you.
Well, very, very kind of you. Most of us grew up around the Big Four. As I mentioned, maybe you weren't as familiar with hockey or calling hockey as the other ones, but those of us, especially who grew up in the Northeast and the New York area, you had a pretty good sense for the history of each of the four major sports, for the rules, the players and coaches. But when I do dive into a sport that I might be not as familiar with, such as track and field back in Rio in 2016 or volleyball back in 2021, it was the 2020 Olympics the next year. And I'm studying water polo now. I really enjoy the variety and the challenge of learning some of those new sports, but by no means are we as entrenched, as ingrained in those sports as the ones that we grew up around. To me, hockey, it's like riding a bike. I've done it for so long, over 30 years, started in the minor leagues, called a couple of games in Utica where you worked with the Baltimore Skipjacks, and we went up to play the Utica Devils, who were actually coached for one season by Herb Brooks, believe it or not, about a decade after the miracle in Lake Placid. But again, when you get assigned to one of the other sports, and my philosophy was never turn down anything, the more you can do, the better. So I remember in my early years working in D.C., calling hockey, some basketball and some baseball, but the network that I worked for, Home Team Sports, had the contract to the ACC conference. So they would send me to a lacrosse event or a soccer match or a volleyball game. And I think it really helped in developing the skills, even though I might not have been as familiar with those sports.
Sure, no doubt. And that having that great analyst, and a lot of times with those smaller sports, you have big-time analysts that really know that sport really well. That's huge, right?
Huge. I mean, I think back to the track and field and the volleyball at the Olympics, and I had tremendous analysts in both sports, and just made me feel so comfortable. The first couple of days might have been a little tentative, but then once you get into the rhythm and the flow, but the analysts are a huge part of it. And prior to the 2020 Olympics, I actually sat down with a local high school volleyball coach here in New Jersey where I live, and this was about a month and a half, 2 months before, and she was tremendous. I said to her, teach me about the history, the rules, et cetera. And that was a big part of the preparation.
That's awesome. I know, Kenny, of course, you do Knicks games, and Knicks made a big trade. Fans are pretty excited right now. What did you think? I know a lot of people didn't expect that to happen, but the Knicks are being very aggressive as they try to chase down the Celtics in the Eastern Conference.
Well, they had a terrific season. They made the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years, finished second in the East this year. And, obviously the injuries were a major factor during the playoffs, wound up losing in a game 7 in the second round to Indiana. I was following along on social media last night, just like everybody else was. And I know nothing's official, nothing can be announced yet, but when you look at the core, the 3 Villanova players, obviously, with Brunson, DiVincenzo, and Josh Hart. And then if and when it does become official, I know, those guys have been hoping for Bridges for a long time, right? We've heard it throughout the season, and they had a lot of draft pick capital to play with. So, again, we'll see when the official announcement comes out and the draft. They have 2 picks in the first round, but exciting times over the last few seasons with both teams at Madison Square Garden, the Knicks and the Rangers. And if this reported trade does in fact come to fruition, it's just another step towards that next goal and to hopefully advance further in the playoffs than they did this year.
Kenny, here in Cleveland, the Cavs are kind of in a similar boat to the Knicks. I mean, the Knicks crushed them 2 years ago, but they're another one of those teams that's in the mix in that second tier of the Eastern Conference. And the Cavs just hired Kenny Atkinson to be their coach, who, of course, I thought did a good job with a not very talented Nets team. What did you think about that hire by the Cavs?
I love Kenny Atkinson. Got to know him a little bit when he was an assistant coach with the Knicks. He's a really good guy. He's a basketball lifer. He's probably in the gym, in the office 20 hours a day. I actually saw Kenny Atkinson play in high school, believe it or not, in a high school all-star game, the Newsday Classic on Long Island in the mid-'80s. I was in high school on Long Island as well, on the North Shore, and I was covering high school sports for the town paper, the Port Washington News. And for several years, I would go cover the Newsday Classic. It was a boys' game and a girls' game at Nassau Coliseum. And it was the best players from all over Long Island. And I specifically remember Kenny Atkinson playing in that game, and then followed his career when he went on to Richmond and had some big upsets in the NCAA tournament during his career there. His coach was Dick Tarrant, who wound up, believe it or not, as a color analyst of mine about 30 years ago when I was working down in D.C. So I would hear about Kenny Atkinson from Coach Tarrant, and he's had a terrific career, as an assistant coach, as a head coach in the NBA, spent a couple of years working with Steve Kerr in Golden State. And, the players and coaches that I've heard talk about him just gush about his basketball knowledge and the way he treats people. So couldn't be happier for him.
Kenny, there's the game 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. I mean, we need to do a sports version of that with you. 6 Degrees of Kenny Albert.
I've heard that before. There's a list in my book of the over 225 color analysts that I've worked with in each of the various sports. So you probably could play the 6 Degrees game with me as well.
Yeah, no doubt. You've worked with so many people. That's cool. Well, tell me more about the book and why, after all this time, you decided to write this book.
Well, Adam, it's been over 30 years, hard to believe, in sportscasting, starting in minor league hockey back in 1990 in Baltimore, and just felt like I accumulated so many stories. I speak at numerous broadcasting camps every summer. I have 3 of them over the next couple of weeks with high school and college students, and they always ask such great questions, and I wind up telling the same stories each and every time, and always thought about writing a book. I felt like I have so many stories, chapters about each sport I've worked, chapter on the Olympics, chapter on all of the color analysts I've worked with, a chapter on travel tales, a chapter on how things worked broadcast-wise during the pandemic, a chapter on my early life growing up in a sportscasting family, getting my start in high school and college. Even prior to that, I write about the fact that I was born 3 months premature, spent the first 2.5 years in 2.5 months, not years, in an incubator in Lenox Hill Hospital. I was 1 pound, 15 ounces when I was born. A chapter paying it forward to young broadcasters. So, when I started, it was a daunting task. A book agent by the name of Andrew Blauner in New York connected me with Triumph Books in Chicago, and they were terrific during the entire process. And they told me we need 70,000 words by September of 2022. And I remember at one point, and I did it myself, no ghostwriter, had a lot of help from my wife and kids as far as editing and suggesting some stories that I may have forgotten about. But I was at 30,000, and I was thinking to myself, how am I ever going to get to 70,000? But finally, reached the goal, the end goal. And it's kind of surreal, not only to see my name and my face on the cover of a book, but 2 of my broadcast colleagues, Wayne Gretzky and Walt Clyde Frazier, were kind enough to write the forwards, which awesome. I can't thank them enough. And I've worked about 15 games a year with Clyde for the last decade plus, and Wayne's part of the NHL on TNT pre- and post-game show. So the fact that they contributed and their names are on the cover along with mine, it was just such a fun process to be a part of.
The book is called A Mic for All Seasons. I'm sure you can get it at all the usual places, Kenny, right?
All the usual places. It's available in certain bookstores,
yeah,
online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, TriumphBooks.com. It's available in hardcover and paperback now as well.
And I look forward to if we can get you back on when football season hits us, because it's going to be a wild season in the AFC North this year and in the AFC East, but it's going to another great football season. Thank you, Kenny. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Adam. Anytime. Look forward to doing it again.
Awesome, as always, to chat with the great play-by-play man, Kenny Albert. Royalty, family royalty in the media world. Kenny is a great play-by-play man, and that's why he gets hired to do every sport. He does the Olympics, baseball, football, basketball, hockey. He does it all, and so great chatting with him. Thanks to all of you for listening and watching today. Please hit the like. Please hit the subscribe. Thanks to Max for filling in for Monzo producing today. And thanks to Kenny Albert for joining me and all of you. I really appreciate it. We love it. We love you. Thank you, fans. I appreciate it so much. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Remember the live show tomorrow, live at 2 p.m. Make sure you're with me. We're talking Cavs' new coach, Cavs draft, right? Cavs got the draft tonight. Well, we'll get into that. We'll talk about who they draft, what trades might happen with what the Knicks did. We'll get into, of course, the Guardians, as I mentioned, and who knows what the heck else we'll get into on the live show again Thursday, 2 p.m. We'll talk to you then. Where else but right here in the bullpen with Adam the Bull, brought to you by BetRivers. See you, everybody.